Hello, everyone. It's Eric Quick, and welcome back to Bath Time to Boardroom, where we bring you stories of working parents or parents-to-be and how they blend work, life, and the challenges that come with it. We're on the journey of our 5th season, and it's all about dads. Colleen is continuing to take some wonderful time off this summer. We'll be back late summer to join us. Today, we've got guest co-host John Herringer, aka JP, dad of 3, entrepreneur, motivational speaker, and the chief motivator at Method 3 Fitness, the group that I can blame for my daily soreness after the workouts there. John, great to have you in the co-host seat today.
Excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me. And today we're looking forward to talking with Andy Wong. Andy is a successful real estate agent in the Los Altos Hills, Mountain View, and Sunnyvale communities. Fun fact here, most people don't know that after graduating UC Berkeley in engineering, he was actually awarded a patent for a tool used to maintain nuclear reactors. And then went on to earn an MBA, went to Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan, worked in management consulting and high tech before transitioning to this successful real estate business. So welcome, Andy.
Things you learn.
Glad to be here, guys. Thanks.
Yeah. Andy has also lived in Los Altos area for more than 20 years and is very engaged in the community. Andy was actually one of the first people I met when we moved into the community and had our kids going to Montclair Elementary, which is pretty close to where Andy lives. From organizing summer picnics to hosting several hundred trick-or-treaters at his home, also known as the Charlie Brown House, every October, Andy truly loves the community. And most importantly, he loves his family. He's a dad of 2 daughters, 21 and 19, and a son aged 9. Andy, great to have you on today.
I'm glad to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's get into it. We're going to start with bath time first, Andy. So let's start with just telling us more about your experience growing up.
So, most people are surprised to learn that I'm actually the youngest of 8 kids, and I'm the only boy.
That is impressive. Wow. Survival, man. Wow.
Yeah, you should. People often ask, like, were you like the spoiled prince growing up? And yes and no. And in some ways, I enjoyed a lot of privileges that my sisters didn't have growing up, and some of that was because my parents just couldn't afford to pay for a lot of things when they were younger. And in other ways, I appreciate the fact that my sisters kind of paved the way for me, like, many older siblings paved the way for their younger siblings. And so by the time I came around, my parents were, fairly chill and about most things. And then the other thing is, what's interesting is that my youngest sister is actually 7 years older than me. And so by the time I turned 11, I was pretty much the only child at home because everybody left for college after high school. And so, I had this sort of interesting childhood of being around in a big family, but also being an only child at some places.
That's very interesting. I can actually relate a little bit. I've got 2 older brothers, both 8 and 10 years older than me. And I will say they paved the way in many ways, some of it conditioning my parents to certain things that were maybe less than desirable. To where when I got there, it wasn't such a big deal, going through some of these things. So, looks like it sounds like your family is very accomplished as well. You kind of got to have some great role models with your sisters.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say, they're great role models for me. And I always looked up to them growing up. And the flip side of that was, what's interesting is despite the fact that neither of my parents went to college, 3 out of 7 of my sisters are a doctor or orthodontist or pharmacist. And then all the others have a master's degree or they're very accomplished professionals in their own fields. And so even though my parents didn't, explicitly put a lot of pressure on me, I put a lot of pressure on myself because I felt like I had to somehow live up to the family standard. And it's just, it was a story that I made up for myself it was one of those things that I just had, I look back and it's like, wow, I did put a lot of pressure on myself.
Well, hopefully it was good pressure in a way that it got you to be as successful as you are today. So, and what do you think, with your parents, they had 8 kids to kind of oversee and parents and everything. And how do you think that they have had an influence on your own parenting style?
Yeah. So what's funny is, having 7 older sisters is kind of like having 8 moms. And, I got
We've
very
got one.
good
We've
at
got
like,
one daughter, and I can already see it with Gavin. He's got 2 moms. It's hilarious.
I know, right? Yeah. So growing up, I got very good at like following directions from because they're all very like opinionated and strong women. And so they all like wanted to tell me what to do. And so I got really good at following instructions from multiple people at the same time, and sometimes not always like on the same page, like conflicting instructions. And so, even at our dinner table, it's like I can sort of listen in on like 2 or 3 conversations going on because there's just so many people at the table sometimes. But I think as far as like my own parenting or the way my parents parented me, one of the greatest gifts that my parents gave me as a young adult was, a sense of confidence and trust. And by that, I mean, as I got older and I was facing life and career decisions, I would go to my parents and I would ask them, hey, here's what's going on, and here's the decision I'm trying to make, and what do you think? And they would give me their input. And then, at the end of every discussion, they would always say to me, well, that's just what we think. But, this is your life, and the situation much better than we do. And so it's really up to you. And so I never really felt like they were, as I became an adult, I never felt like they were telling me what to do. They would just sort of give me their thoughts, and then they sort of trusted me to make it the best decision I could with the information I had.
That's a pretty unique trait. I think that's fantastic too, because even if they, maybe internally vehemently disagreed with whatever you may be doing, they gave you the freedom to fail ultimately, right, or succeed, hopefully, which is a great gift, because that's obviously how you learn to become an even better parent. I think. So, out of curiosity, what do they think of your parenting philosophy? I know, at least, for myself, maybe it's generational things that change, or where they were raised, or things like that have an influence on how they parent and their beliefs. But I know sometimes I'm at odds with, my parents and their parenting philosophy. So what do they think of yours, and how does that how does that translate to, family gatherings when they're all together, when you're all together?
Yeah. So yeah, they're pretty hands off as far as like trying to influence me as a parent to my own kids. They're the best grandparents. They're always happy for my kids with whatever they're doing. And so, I try my best to support my kids to make their own choices, even as they were growing up. And so, each of them has their own personality. And so we try to support them as unique individuals as they mature. But, to your point, John, it's not always easy because as a parent, we think we know better. And so a lot of times I have to refrain from protecting them from what I think is a suboptimal decision, right?
Suboptimal. I love that. That's great. So speaking of your kids, tell us more about them. I know you have the 2 daughters, I think 21 and 19, and then a son that's 9, correct?
Yeah. So
Great.
yeah. So our girls, they're basically young adults now. I mean, they're adults, right? And it's just amazing that they have this bond between the 2 of them. And as parents, it just makes us so happy to see that they really are each other's best friends, and their biggest fans. Like, they are always happy for each other when good things happen to them. And our youngest, he's a boy, and raising a boy is very different than raising girls. And so it's actually been very humbling, because I feel like, even though we've raised 2 young adults, we feel like, we should know how this goes. And it turns out we're starting over with the basics again. It's kind of like that game, Chutes and Ladders, where you work your way up the game board to the top, and there's that one square. If you hit that square, you slide all the way to the bottom, and you have to start over again. So a lot of times it feels like we hit that slide square and we're starting from scratch and having to relearn all the parenting skills that we thought we knew in a totally different context.
It's so interesting too. I think, and that's so challenging. And yet, I talk about it with my wife. It's like raising kids and being a parent. It's it's one of the most challenging things to do, but it's also one of the most rewarding. It's one of the things that just lends itself to such great personal development, right? So it's like you've taken this little shoot, back down, but you've got this great path of development on the way up to become an even better parent, So it's this equal blend of challenge and gift, right?
So I think there's also just to jump in here, I think there's also there's no cookie cutter approach to any of them, right? Like your two daughters, as close in age as they are, I have a brother that's a year and 15 days older than I am. Like we couldn't be any more different, right? And growing up, they shared a room till I went away to college. Like we battled, but then, after the fact, it's like we're super close now. So there's always that risk, but raising kids in general, while they may be close in age, they're different, unique personalities, individuals, things that drive them. So very interesting. It's almost like there's principles of parenting you can apply to your son, but you're dealing with a new situation, right? And how that gets guided and nurtured through his life.
Yeah, totally different context.
And what's Andy, what makes you most proud of your kids? I'm sure there's many, many things to note, but maybe some recent things come to mind as we've traveled through the last year and a half here.
Yeah. So what's interesting is, what I respect most about my oldest is her desire to make a difference in this world. Even at a young age, she kind of had this, drive about her. And, when she got into college, she changed her major a lot, quite a few times in the first year and a half there, but there was always a common theme. And so whether it was, major X, major Y, major whatever, there was always this common theme. And so when people asked, I would say, well, she's basically majoring in saving the world. And because it was always that common theme. For example, from a young age, she's always had a heart for social justice. It started with a strong interest in human trafficking, and then it sort of expanded from there in terms of her worldview. And so going into her senior year in college, she's going to get her undergrad degree in sociology. She got early admittance into the Graduate School of Social Work at the University of Michigan. And this summer, she's interning at the Urban Institute in Washington, D.C. And so, she's already sort of got this guiding light, or, she's got this, she's charted out this career path where, she wants to be in a position to influence policies related to things like trauma-informed alternatives to the legal system, justice seeking, data-driven policy assessments. And to be honest, it's like the student has become the teacher, because whenever she comes home or I talk to her on the phone, I just love learning about all these super important social issues that she's so passionate about. And I could just sit there and listen for hours and ask questions like, well, what about this? And what about this? And she just kind of, she can just go so deep into these topics and help me understand like why these things are so important today. And so that's what I really appreciate about her. Her younger sister, like what Eric was saying, is she has a very different set of interests and skills. She started her sophomore year, or she's starting her sophomore year in biomechanical and mechanical engineering at Carnegie Mellon. And she's also playing basketball in college. And all this sounds super amazing, and it is. But the thing I really respect about her is her perseverance through all the crap that came through the pandemic over the last 18 months. She and so many of her, peers at this age, they missed out on so many important milestones. She missed out on the second half of her senior year in high school. They missed out on all the traditional rites of passage, like senior prom, graduation, ditch days even. And all the while,
forget those.
I mean, these are the things you remember when you look back in high school, right? Yep. It's like, but all the while we were holding on to the hope that, her consolation would be, hey, at least you get to go to college in the fall and you have that to look forward to. But, that didn't happen either. She started her freshman year of college in her bedroom, and that kind of sucks. Yeah. And again, she missed out on all the formative experiences like moving into the dorms, freshman orientation, meeting all these strangers who would become your new best friends.
Sure.
And so, and then she finally got to go to campus in the spring, and then she found out like the basketball conference canceled the entire season. And then on top of that, she was subjected to solitary quarantine because people around her tested positive. And so honestly, it's been really hard for her emotionally. And, each disappointment just kind of like adds on to the next one. And so it was a lot. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you like, oh, and everything's great despite everything that's happened. There's some good days and some bad days, and it's real. But, she hasn't given up, and, just is continuing to go forward every day, one day at a time. And, honestly, I think she's handling it way better than I could have if I were her in her shoes at that age. And, we just keep praying for her that she can continue persevering through these challenges. And, eventually it's going to get better. We just, we hold on to that hope. As far as our youngest one, we're super excited and proud of him in a totally different context. The pandemic has not been kind to our little guy either. And, I think it's a cruel experiment to take an energetic, social little boy and then isolate him from all his friends and his teachers. And then you put him in front of a screen, you expect him to sit there and like do school every day. And we just lost count of all the meltdowns. It's, through it. It was just a regular thing. And, that being said, I think all the meltdowns and all the hardship kind of revealed a lot of things about him and how his brain is wired, and how we need to rethink our approach as parents and how to support him. And I really appreciate how he's grown through this experience. It hasn't been easy for him or any of us at home, and we certainly, as parents, we have lots of emotional scars that come along with trying to support them through this difficult season. And, we're not through it yet. We're looking forward to starting school, but, it's going to be lots of change and lots of transition. And so we're just really thankful that we were able to learn so much about him and his brain. And we're embracing things that we never had to really think about, like mental health and concepts like neurodiversity and versus neurotypical brains and kids. So, it's a learning process for us. And so we're in it, and, we're embracing it, and it's a struggle, but we're just really proud that these kids are going through it. And I think that's, beyond the accomplishments. I mean, we're just happy for them that they can persevere through it.
Yeah, it's quite a test, and it's something you almost hope that they'll be able to reflect back on it just to see like how strong they were to get through something like this. I have to say, I really love hearing you talk about each and every one of them, because what comes across to me is, you obviously have this successful career as a real estate agent, amongst many other things like holding a patent and things like that. But you're obviously a very just engaged parent, right? And it's one thing to be engaged, on the surface level. It's another thing to be engaged on the emotional level and kind of there for them to ask questions, to listen, to let them vent, to provide mentorship or advice where appropriate. And I think over the last year and a half, that was, like you said, we as parents have a lot of emotional scars, and hopefully kind of as we get through this as well with them, right? All those scars and things will heal, and we'll all come out stronger. And then, we as parents hopefully come out better parents. And it really sounds like that you are, right? You guys are a team that's helping your kids really get through this. So let's segue real quick into some comedy. So tell me, Andy, some of the funny things that your kids have said to you, maybe over the years, or memories that really stick out as just moments of hilarity that you cherish.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that laughter can help us get through a lot of this. And before we dive into that, I just have to give credit to my wife, Eileen. I mean, she's really been a strong pillar in our family, and not to say like it's not taking its toll on her as well, but she's really, I couldn't have done any of this without her. And she really is, not just my life partner, but, she's a partner in parenting and everything and all aspects. And so, that's that I can't say enough about that. But, in terms of answering a question about like funny things that the kids do. So we have this running joke in our family, because my girls love to tease me because I can't handle spicy food. Like, yeah, I might be the only Chinese person you'll ever meet that actually cannot handle his spice. And so, we'll sit down at a meal and I'll ask like, hey, is that spicy? And they'll say, no, not for us, but maybe for you, Dad. And so, or I'll say like, oh, that's spicy. And they just kind of look at me like, come on, Dad, that's not even, it's pepper.
Yeah, right.
And then even the little guy gets into it. Like, just the other day, I was driving him over to a friend's house for a play date. And like, he's giving me a hard time because he thinks I'm taking the long way to his friend's house. And he's like, we'd be there now if you went the other way. And I'm like, dude, can you even see over the dashboard? Like, I'm getting you there. Just give me a minute here.
No backseat drivers, buddy.
Oh, that's
exactly.
Great. That is great. So Andy, what do you think are some of the best things about being a dad?
I think it's the most rewarding thing for me is just seeing my kids mature as young adults, and as becoming from a little kid to becoming a big kid. That's super rewarding just to see their growth and maturity.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, you have the three, and if you can reflect back to before even the first one, is there anything you wish you knew about having kids, right? Or even just rearing them before you had them?
Yeah, I wish, I think a lot of parents would resonate with this. I wish each kid came with like an owner's manual, like something that we could go back to and say, like, why did they do this? And like, what does that mean? And how do I deal with that?
Like a troubleshooting guide that's actually longer than the manual itself, right?
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Especially for the opposite sex, if you have girls, because there's just clearly things that we just don't understand, nor could we ever, because we're physically different. I know we're experiencing that with our kids right now. It's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'm a boy, but like, okay, this is a little different, and I'm not a girl. I don't understand. I don't identify as one. So wow, okay.
I don't feel equipped to answer this yet. I'm going to take a pause, and that's great. Yeah, I agree, Andy. Well, thank you so much for all those answers, Andy. This has been great. And before we dive into the boardroom, let's hear what our sponsor Brainiac has to say.
When the only fish your kids will eat are gold, give them a Brainiac. Choose from snack favorites like applesauce and peanut butter that have a boost of omega-3s, choline, and other brain-building nutrients. To learn more, visit brainiacfoods.com.
All right, Brainiac, thank you so much. Andy, love to learn more about how you went from nuclear reactors to real estate. What was that transition or epiphany like?
So, I did start my professional career as an engineer, and I did some interesting work there. And then, I went back to school to get my MBA, and then I spent some time in management consulting in the high tech, and then worked for some high tech companies and startups. But it was really 9/11. If we go back to the beginning, I wasn't in New York City, and I was, or anything like that at the time. But I remember watching it on TV and seeing the towers collapse was just shook me. Mm-hmm. I was working in high tech at the time, and I really loved what I was doing. But I asked myself, if I was in the towers and died that day, what would I have left behind for everybody as a legacy? And as much as what I enjoyed what I was doing professionally, I didn't feel like I would have been satisfied if that's all I had left behind. And so, after a lot of soul searching and prayer and wise counsel, I decided to pursue something that was more relational and community focused. And for me, real estate was perfect for that. It was a perfect path because, I grew up as the son of a real estate agent, and I saw firsthand how my dad helped people achieve their dreams in a very relational and local way.
And I could imagine how satisfying that is, especially for first-time home buyers, where you're actually helping them find the ideal. I'd also imagine that growing up being, the youngest out of all of the kids that were around, and you were saying earlier that you could listen to multiple conversations and different perspectives at the same time. I'm sure that helps as you're dealing with partners that may not agree on what the right next house is or the first house is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's part. It's sort of like being a part-time therapist as well. You have to use all your listening skills to help people to, figure things
Compromise.
out along the way. Yeah, exactly.
I know you wanted 10,000 square feet more than this, but let's help you get into this house as well. Talk to us about what's the life of a real estate agent look like? Because I know coming from the service industry, weekends, nights tend to happen. But what does that look like, or what has that looked like? Has it evolved for you over the last 20 years?
Yeah, things have changed a lot, and all for the good. It used to be, we would, if it was representing a buyer, you'd spend hours driving them around from house to house to look at the homes. And what I find that these days, most of my clients really don't have time for that. They don't have 3 hours on the weekend to go drive around looking at houses with me, because they got soccer games, they got birthday parties to go to. And so the role of the agent has really shifted from showing people where the homes are to helping them to understand what they're looking for. Because, buyers usually come in with a fairly broad perspective. And so I kind of give them some counsel and talk them through the process to help them narrow down what is it they want, where do they want to be. And then, what's much more opportunistic when a home comes on the market, we kind of evaluate and say, based on the things you're looking for, it checks off most of the boxes, but not all. And here's some of the trade-offs. And so we're helping them to evaluate, is this the right house? And if they like it, what's the right price to offer without overpaying? But, it's in a competitive market, you're still bidding for it. And so it's really more of a consultant than, a tour guide, so to speak.
Sure. And are you doing more work up front before the transaction actually happens, or is it more work actually once you start to get a signed offer?
Oh, yeah.
Or accepted offer for that
in terms
matter.
of yeah. So a lot of it is up front. Like a lot of times I'll go and see the house before my clients will. I go out and see the new listings so that I can report back to them, because their time is so valuable. Again, they don't have a lot of time to go look at a lot of homes. So, let's say there's 5 homes that come on the market on a given week. I'll go scout them out and then let them know, here, out of these 5, I think there's 2 that might work for you. And so let's focus our time and look at those 2. And we don't have to worry about the other 3 because, they're deficient for the following reasons. And then also, working with the sellers, there's a ton of upfront work in terms of preparing the house, preparing the marketing materials so that when it hits the market, everything is dialed in, and also, preparing all the disclosures. So the general perception is the house goes on the market and a week later it sells. But there's probably 4 weeks of prep time before it even gets on the market, so that we can get it sold efficiently.
And on that note, is there a number of days that you like to see houses sell? If you're selling it, you'd like to see it sell in? Because obviously the market here in the Bay Area is ridiculous. But is there a sweet spot for you where, you feel like you've got an adequate amount of offers, but you're not just selling it to sell it as quickly as possible?
Exactly. So, it's interesting that I I get the postcards at my house too, where, an agent will say, sold a house in 2 days on the market or whatever. And and to me personally, I think that's suboptimized. I like to see the house on the market for, at least a week to 10 days to give it a long enough time to be exposed, run it through the weekend so that, someone can't go see it during the week. They can go see it over the weekend, and then give them some time to think about it to make sure this is really what they want, and then to make a thoughtful offer. I think that takes about 7 to 10 days of market time, which, anyone outside of our little market here in the Bay Area, that seems like a really short amount of time. But in our market, buyers are sort of conditioned to that's the cycle that they're on.
Definitely. And you mentioned weekends. I would imagine a realtor's workday could be 24/7 if you let it. How do you set boundaries? How do you ensure that you have time to be a great dad?
Yeah. I've been really fortunate that most of the clients that come to me, they know what my priorities and values are. And so they're actually very respectful of my family time. And I kind of also look at it as, realtors, you're right, it can be 24/7 with no boundaries. But I think the way I look at it is, like if I needed to call my attorney, I'm not going to call him at 7. I could call him at 7 o'clock, but I know he's not going to pick up, right? Because that's not his role. Or my CPA or my doctor or any other trusted professional, they have normal business hours. And so, I think I've been fortunate that I think most of my clients, they see me in the same light that, Andy's a realtor, but he's got a life outside of real estate. And so most of them, will contact me during normal business hours, and we can have conversations, or we go look at homes, or, and I work in everything by appointments. Like if they can't talk or meet during business hours, we'll set an appointment in the evening on the weekends. But I think it takes a lot of intention to say, okay, this is going to be my schedule. These are the normal hours I work. And people respect that once you communicate.
And so you're explicitly communicating that to them on kind of the front end of a relationship, just so that there's aligned expectations.
Yeah. And that's one of many expectations I set along the way. And I think that's where, it's so important to start the relationship on firm footing. And a lot of times, almost every time, I will say, I'm here to help you as a trusted professional. And as part of that, I feel a personal obligation to tell you what you need to know, even if it's not exactly what you want to hear. And that sounds a little harsh at the beginning, but I will tell you, almost every time there's kind of this look of relief on their face. They feel like, oh, thank goodness we found somebody who's willing to tell us the truth, because that's what we really want to know. And they're mature enough to realize, like, it may not always be what they want to hear, but they value that honesty, and that sense of integrity, that I'm here to be honest and truthful with you to help you accomplish what you want.
Yeah. And I would imagine there's probably the other end of the spectrum here in the Bay Area, where you may have somebody that maybe isn't aligned with your values. Have you had situations like that in the past where you're just like, I don't know that I'm the right realtor for you based on what your objectives, et cetera, are?
Yeah. I mean, it's nothing personal. It's just sometimes people we're not a good fit. And actually a good friend of mine is a therapist, and she once told me, picking a therapist is like trying on shoes. They might look great on the shelf, but when you put them on your feet, it just doesn't fit right. And you shouldn't buy that shoe, because you want to buy a shoe that fits. And in the same way, the potential client could be a great person, but for one reason or another, it's just not a good fit. And I'm okay with, saying that, and say, you know what, maybe we're not the best fit, but let me introduce you to somebody who might be a better fit for what you're trying to accomplish. And it doesn't have to be personality as well. It could be just like geographic preference. So I'm a big believer in being a hyper local agent. So I focus on Los Altos and the areas around it, but other agents are like Bay Area agents. So from Marin County down to South County of Santa Clara over to the East Bay, and they cover the whole geography. But I don't. So I'm pretty upfront with people to say, hey, if you need my help in, say, Pleasanton, I'm not an expert in Pleasanton. Like, I honestly couldn't tell you things that you couldn't look up on the internet yourself, because the internet is so rich with information.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of that research yourself. However, if you want to buy a home in Los Altos, or you want to sell a home in Los Altos, then I'm your guide, because I can help by providing information that's not readily available on the internet. Like, for example, why is this house on this street worth more or less than the other house that's just one block away, even though on paper they look very similar? Because I live here and I developed a level of expertise. I know why certain streets are more valuable than others in certain neighborhoods.
Definitely.
And so, and that's information that you can't really look up as easily on the internet. And I think
and
that's
as a first-time home buyer too, I know we struggled with this, where it was like, well, what? I don't have kids. Why am I worried about schools?
right.
Resale value, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have kids and you're like, oh, okay, the school district that I'm in is actually really important. And we were fortunate to be part of the Cupertino School District, which had Montclair, which had this amazing parent community. And I would imagine, if you're talking Pleasanton, I used to live near there, like there's just certain things you're not going to know down to that level, and kind of the broader benefits to it. I'm curious, kind of as a last question in the boardroom, curious to how you've taken that community focus. I know you've done some fun things at your house and otherwise, but can you tell us a little bit more about how you not just said, hey, I'm community focused and I'm focused on these areas, but really kind of taken that, down into daily, weekly, monthly, seasonally approach within the community?
Yeah. It never really, the initial intention behind all that was never, for business or for real estate purposes. It kind of came down, the fundamental philosophy was, if you want to live in a nice neighborhood, you have to be a really good neighbor to your neighbors. I mean, that's how it starts. And so, a long time ago, one of my neighbors shared an article with me about, forming a neighborhood email group. I mean, this is way before Nextdoor and everything. So I started a Yahoo group so that neighbors could communicate and connect with each other. And it just sort of grew and grew and grew. And to the point where, neighbors are connecting and sharing with each other on a regular basis. The community events that I organize, the whole purpose is to bring neighbors together who, may not see each other as often. And it's always fun to see, like, at our annual picnics, there's always neighbors that knew each other, 20 years ago when their kids were at Montclair. And then, once your kids are out of school and off to college, they don't see each other as often because their kids aren't around anymore. And then it's almost like a little mini reunion where they can connect with each other and renew their friendships. And so that is super rewarding.
Nice.
And, the Halloween stuff we do, I always try to, steer towards the cute part of Halloween as opposed to the scary part of Halloween. And we always show the same movie. It's always the Charlie Brown Halloween special. We always serve hot chocolate and water and cookies and candy, because I want kids to look back and remember this as a tradition. Like, oh, I remember growing up, we always used to go to this Charlie Brown house, and it was a positive thing for them.
So true. True. Just to make the mark on the kids, God, you remember when we used to go there? Chocolate was so good. And you're like, that's what you want, right? Those memories and creating those memories within the community. This has been awesome, Andy. I have probably several more hours of questions for you that we will need to move on to Rapid Fire 5. John, I think you're teed up to do Rapid Fire 5 today.
I am, sir. All right. Andy, are you ready, sir?
All right.
Okay. So if you recall, we're going to ask you a series of questions here. You've got 2 answers in just a few seconds to answer. Got to choose one of those 2 answers too. Okay. All right. So Andy, dark chocolate or milk chocolate?
Dark chocolate.
Excellent. And how about a favorite downtime activity? Would you prefer hiking or reading a book?
Oh, that one's a hard one. I'd say 50-50, because I love to read, but I love to be outside too.
Fair enough. Oh, now, who has the better taste in music, you or your wife?
Me.
Me.
Sure.
Hear that, Eileen?
That's great. Yeah, right.
Earth, Wind, and
Okay.
Fire is my all-time favorite band.
There you go.
The whole family,
All right.
they make fun of me for that too.
So, which leads us to the next one here: Van Halen or Kenny Chesney?
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Okay, now let's talk post-COVID trip. So, Switzerland or Hawaii?
Everybody in my family knows like Hawaii is my happy place, but Eileen would say Switzerland because she's far more adventurous than I am in terms of travel.
So Eileen wins in this case. Switzerland it is.
Probably.
Okay, perfect. Got it. All right. Last one: Michigan or Ohio State?
Michigan. Come on. Go blue.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, Andy, thanks for playing Rapid Fire 5 with us. Now it's time for Pocket Perspectives, which is a quotable one-liner, mantra, or tweet that resonates with you or you live by, you want to share with our listeners today.
Yeah. So I actually have two. And, I coach a lot of sports, mostly basketball, from, kindergartners at the YMCA, NJB, and most recently coaching in high school team. And so all of the players that I've ever coached, they all know these two phrases that I always drill into them. First one is, everything is hard before it's easy. And then the second one that I drill into them is, I'm not good at this yet.
Love it. Love it. John, what do you got today?
One of my all-time favorite quotes, Henry David Thoreau: "If you advance confidently in the direction of your dreams and endeavor to live the life that you have imagined, you'll meet with a success unexpected in common hours." That's literally been something that I've had on my wall, in my planner, like on a reminder to myself to just keep forging ahead and keep trying to create what it is I want to create, whether it's professionally or personally.
Yeah, it's so true, especially for what Andy was mentioning earlier with his second oldest and her perseverance through a lot of the challenges that have been thrown at her getting out of high school and into college. For me, it's something that Andy said today really, I think, resonates on, as we've talked before on the podcast about creating memories, not just, buying things for kids. And it's really around, taking an active role in building community and that being essential for creating memories for our kids that will last lifetimes and that they can remember when they're older, when they actually have kids that they're raising. So cool. Andy, thank you for being our guest today. It was great having you on the program. And thanks, JP, for co-hosting with me today. You can learn more about Andy by visiting his website at andyrealestate.com. That's ANDYREALESTAT.com. Or you can find him on Facebook at Andy Wong Real Estate and on Instagram at Andy Real Estate. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, or subscribe anywhere you find your podcasts. Till next time, that's a wrap. Whether it's at bath time or in the boardroom, remember to cherish these moments and make a splash. Bye, everyone.
So, Eric, what do you have this week for jokes?
Well, I know you like to do weigh-ins with your clients at Method 3. So how much does an influencer weigh?
That's a great question. I don't know.
An Instagram.
Hey.
What do you got?
Okay, right back at you here. How does a frog feel when he has a broken leg? Unhappy.
Oh.
Hey.
True. All right, we got a lot of hackers out there today with ransomware and all that good stuff. How do hackers escape from police?
How do hackers escape from police? Not coming to me.
They ran somewhere. Like these tie-ins to the physical activity thing.
Pretty good.
Yeah, what do you got to close us out this week?
What did the left eye say to the right eye?
Where are you?
Between us, something smells.
Hopefully it's not diaper time, diaper duty time. Awesome. All right. See you next week. Bye for now.